Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Ashford, Tennessee. My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old, and I'm sitting in a courtroom watching my husband laugh while he signs the papers that end our marriage. Rain hadn't fallen that morning, but the air inside that courthouse pressed down on my chest like something living, something heavy, something that wanted me to stop breathing. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. The wooden bench beneath me was cold, and across the aisle, the man I'd given 6 years of my life to was smiling like he'd just won the lottery. His name was Derek Calloway. And to anyone in Ashford who knew the Calloway name, he was golden. Old money, country club membership, a father who ran the biggest commercial real estate firm in the county, a mother who chaired charity galas and wore pearls to the grocery store. The Callaways were the kind of family that made you feel lucky just to be invited to their Thanksgiving dinner. And for a while, I did feel lucky. I grew up 40 miles south of Ashford in a town so small it didn't have a traffic light. My mother raised me and my younger brother alone after my daddy passed when I was 11. She cleaned houses during the day and did bookkeeping for local businesses at night. I watched her sit at the kitchen table with a calculator and a cup of cold coffee, making other people's numbers add up while ours barely did. She taught me 2 things that shaped my entire life. First, understand money. Second, never let anyone control yours. I was good with numbers. I mean, really good. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Tennessee, graduated top of my class in accounting, and landed a position at a mid-size financial consulting firm in Ashford right after graduation. That's where I met Derek. He walked in one afternoon to discuss a portfolio his father's company was restructuring. He wore a navy blazer, smiled like he had nowhere else to be, and told me I had the prettiest handwriting he'd ever seen on a financial statement. I laughed. He asked me to dinner, and within a year, we were married. The first 2 years weren't terrible. That's the part people don't understand. Abuse, control, manipulation. It doesn't start with a slap or a scream. It starts with small comments dressed as jokes. It starts with suggestions that slowly become rules. You don't really need to work full-time, do you, Claire? It's not like your salary matters compared to mine. Why would you go to that networking event? Those people aren't on our level. You're an accountant, babe. It's not exactly rocket science. He said these things with a grin, always with a grin, and his mother, Judith Calloway, reinforced every single one. She'd pat my hand at Sunday dinners and say things like, "It's so sweet that you still work, Claire. Derek's grandmother never had to." As if ambition was a character flaw. As if my career was a hobby I'd outgrow. By year 3, Derek had convinced me to leave my firm and take a part-time bookkeeping position closer to home. Less stress, he said, more time for us. What he meant was more time for me to manage the house, attend his family's events, smile in photographs, and shrink. He managed our finances entirely. I had an allowance. A grown woman with an accounting degree, and my husband gave me a debit card with a monthly limit like I was a teenager. When I questioned it, he'd tilt his head and say, "Why are you making this a thing, Claire? Don't I take care of you?" The isolation crept in slowly. My college friends stopped calling because I never had time to see them. My brother Lucas lived in Memphis and noticed something was off during our phone calls, but I always deflected. I told myself this was just what marriage looked like: compromise, adjustment, sacrifice. Then came the affair. Before I tell you exactly what Derek did next, tell me, what time is it, where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. I found out on a Tuesday. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't suspicious, I was doing laundry. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and the preview showed a message from someone named Vanessa P., with a single red heart emoji and the words, "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you." My hands went still. The shirt I was folding dropped to the floor. My stomach didn't just drop, it dissolved. I felt like someone had reached into my ribcage and squeezed. I picked up his phone. I read every message, 6 months of conversations, photos, plans, inside jokes. She worked at his father's company. She was 25, confident, and based on the texts, she knew about me. She knew, and she didn't care. When Derek came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in front of me. He looked at it. Then he looked at me, and he didn't apologize. He didn't panic. He shrugged. Honestly, Claire, I'm relieved you found out. This hasn't been working for a long time. He said it like he was canceling a subscription. Within a week, Derek filed for divorce. His attorney, a friend of his father's, sent over papers that were almost insulting in their simplicity. He wanted the house. He wanted the cars. He wanted me to walk away with a modest settlement and disappear quietly. When I sat across from him at our dining table to discuss terms, he actually laughed. Come on, Claire. What are you going to fight for? Your little bookkeeping gig? You don't have anything. You never did. The words hit me like a physical blow. My throat closed, my eyes burned, but I didn't cry, not in front of him. I sat perfectly still, my hands flat on the table, and I let him believe every word he'd just said. Because what Derek didn't know, what no one in the Calloway family knew, what even my own brother didn't fully understand yet, was that the naive, small-town girl with the little accounting job had been building something in the silence, something enormous, something that was about to change everything. I had no idea that what would happen in that courtroom 3 months later would not only end my marriage but shatter every assumption Derek had ever made about me. The night Derek told me our marriage was over, I drove to a parking lot behind a closed grocery store and sat in my car for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there with the engine running and the radio off, staring at the orange glow of a streetlight reflecting off my windshield. It wasn't the affair that broke me. That was a wound, yes. But wounds I could understand. It was the laughing. It was the absolute certainty in his voice when he said I had nothing. It was the way he looked at me like I was furniture he was donating. That's what cracked something open inside me. Not sadness, something sharper, something colder. Clarity. Because here's what Derek never bothered to notice. 3 years earlier, during the darkest stretch of our marriage, when he was out at dinners I wasn't invited to and weekends at the lake house with his college friends, I started working again. Not the bookkeeping job he knew about. Something else. Something mine. It began with a single client. An old colleague from my former firm, Rachel Whitman, reached out because she needed help restructuring her small business finances after a bad partnership. I did it quietly, from my laptop, at the kitchen table, while Derek was gone. She paid me $3,000. I opened a separate bank account that Derek didn't know about, and I deposited every cent. Then Rachel referred me to someone else, and that person referred me to 2 more. Within 6 months, I had a dozen clients. Within a year, I had incorporated a company. I named it Clarity Financial Consulting. I filed the paperwork myself. I built the website late at night. I met clients during hours Derek assumed I was running errands or at my part-time job. I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was hiding because I understood, deep in my bones, that if Derek knew I was succeeding, he would find a way to take it from me. Control was his oxygen, and my invisibility was my armor. By the time Derek filed for divorce, Clarity Financial had 28 corporate clients, an annual revenue that would have made his jaw drop, and a growing investment portfolio I managed myself. Every dollar I earned, I reinvested. Every profit, I compounded. Every skill my mother taught me at that kitchen table, I weaponized. But the morning after he laughed at me, I almost gave up. I woke up in the guest bedroom with swollen eyes and a headache that pounded behind my temples. The house was quiet. Derek had already left. On the counter, he'd left a sticky note that read, "My attorney will be in touch. Try to make this easy. Try to make this easy." As if I owed him convenience after everything he'd stolen from me. My confidence, my friendships, my sense of self. And now he wanted the dissolution to be comfortable for him too. I called my brother Lucas. He picked up on the first ring. "Claire, what's wrong?" I told him everything. The affair, the filing, the laughing, the years of small cruelties I'd been swallowing like pills. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Claire, you already know your answer. You've known it for years. Would you accept this treatment from a stranger on the street? Would you let a coworker speak to you that way? Then why are you accepting it from the man who promised to love you?" I pressed my forehead against the wall and closed my eyes. "Because I thought love meant staying," I whispered. "No," Lucas said. "Love means being seen. And that man has never once looked at you." That afternoon, I did 3 things. First, I removed my wedding ring and placed it in the nightstand drawer. Not dramatically, not tearfully. I just took it off and set it down like it was a receipt I no longer needed. Second, I called an attorney. Not one of the Calloway family's connections. I found a woman named Diane Prescott, a divorce lawyer in Nashville, with a reputation for being surgically precise and absolutely relentless. I drove an hour to meet her in person. I brought every financial document I had, my business records, my investment statements, my tax filings, the prenuptial agreement Derek's father had insisted we sign before the wedding. Diane read through everything. She looked up at me over her reading glasses and said, "Do you understand what you have here, Claire?" "I think so," I said. "The prenup protects premarital assets and separately acquired property. Everything you built, this company, these investments, they were funded entirely by your own earnings, in your name alone, with no commingling of marital funds." "Not a single dollar of his," I confirmed. Diane leaned back in her chair. "He has no idea, does he?" "None," she smiled. Not a cruel smile, a knowing one. "Then we're not going to tell him. Not yet." Third, I went home, sat at that same kitchen table where I'd built my company from nothing, and I wrote a letter to Derek. I poured everything into it. Every hurt, every humiliation. Every night I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. Every time his mother made me feel small. Every time he made me believe I was less than what I am. Then I folded that letter, placed it in an envelope, and put it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I never sent it. I didn't need to. Writing it was the exorcism. Sending it would have been a performance. Have you ever held on to something so tightly that letting go felt like losing a limb? That's what leaving looked like for me. Not triumphant, not cinematic. It felt like grief. It felt like mourning a version of my life that was never real to begin with. But the next morning, I woke up and the headache was gone. My hands were steady. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't check Derek's mood before deciding what kind of day I would have. I didn't tiptoe. I didn't shrink. I opened my laptop, checked my portfolio, responded to 3 client emails, and scheduled a meeting with a potential investor who wanted to discuss expanding Clarity Financial's reach into corporate training. I was done performing smallness for a man who never deserved my devotion. It was time to let the courtroom see what I'd built in the silence. 3 months passed, and in those 3 months, more changed than in the entire 6 years of my marriage. I moved into a modest apartment in Nashville. Nothing flashy. Clean lines, big windows, a kitchen table where I could work without looking over my shoulder. Diane Prescott handled the legal proceedings with the kind of precision that made Derek's attorney visibly nervous at every hearing. We revealed nothing. We filed standard responses. We let Derek and his team believe exactly what they wanted to believe. that I was a dependent spouse with no leverage, quietly accepting my fate. Meanwhile, Clarity Financial was exploding. The investor I'd been courting, a woman named Priya Aarons who ran a venture collective focused on women-led businesses, came on board with a capital injection that allowed me to hire my first 2 employees. I signed 3 new corporate clients, including a regional healthcare network that needed a complete financial restructuring. My revenue doubled in 90 days. I started being invited to speak at industry panels. A financial magazine in Nashville ran a small feature on emerging consulting firms, and Clarity was listed alongside companies 10 times our size. I wasn't just surviving Derek's absence. I was thriving because of it. Lucas drove down from Memphis one weekend and helped me hang shelves in my new apartment. We ordered Thai food and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought a couch yet, and he looked around and said, "You know what's different about you?" "What?" "You take up space now. You walk into a room like you belong there." I almost cried, because he was right. For years, I had trained myself to be small, to speak softly, to not inconvenience, to fold myself into whatever shape the Callaways needed me to be. And now, for the first time, I was expanding. It wasn't all easy. I want to be honest about that. There were nights I sat alone in that apartment and missed the idea of my marriage. Not Derek, not the reality, but the dream of what I thought it would be. The holidays, the future children I'd imagined, the version of growing old together that existed only in my head. Grief doesn't care about logic. It shows up uninvited, sits in your chest, and stays until it's ready to leave. But I let it come, and I let it go. Have you ever realized that the thing you were most afraid of losing was actually the thing holding you down? That's what those 3 months taught me. I wasn't free despite the divorce. I was free because of it. Then came the courtroom. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. Derek arrived in a charcoal suit, flanked by his attorney and his father, Richard Calloway, who sat in the gallery like he was attending a board meeting. Judith sat beside him, her pearls gleaming, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. I wore a black dress, simple, professional. I sat beside Diane with a leather folder in front of me and my hands folded on the table. Derek's attorney, a man named Howard Crane, presented their case first. He painted a picture of a generous husband who had supported a financially dependent wife throughout the marriage. He referenced my part-time bookkeeping income. He emphasized the lifestyle Derek had provided. He requested that the court grant Derek primary ownership of the marital home, both vehicles, and limit my settlement to a modest alimony package. Derek sat through the entire presentation with a look of bored confidence. At one point, he actually checked his watch. Then it was our turn. Diane stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She simply requested that the court unseal and review a comprehensive financial disclosure that had been filed under seal earlier that week. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Honorable Patricia Langford, opened the folder. The room went quiet. I watched Judge Langford's eyebrows rise. She flipped a page, then another. She looked at Diane. She looked at me. Then she read the key figures aloud. Clarity Financial Consulting. Sole proprietor, Claire Ashby, née Mitchell. Annual revenue, $2.4 million. Verified investment portfolio across diversified holdings, $4.7 million. Total estimated net worth of separately held assets, just over $7 million. I heard Richard Calloway shift in his seat. I heard Judith inhale sharply. I heard Howard Crane whisper something urgent to Derek. And I watched Derek's face. The smirk didn't just fade, it collapsed. His jaw loosened. His eyes widened. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in 6 years. And maybe he was. Diane continued calmly. She referenced the prenuptial agreement, specifically the clause that classified separately acquired assets and independently funded enterprises as non-marital property. Every dollar Clarity earned was mine. Every investment I'd made was mine. Derek's prenup, the one his father had insisted on to protect the Callaway fortune, had inadvertently created an ironclad wall around everything I'd built. The judge reviewed the prenup, confirmed the classification, and ruled accordingly. Derek received the marital home and shared assets. I retained full ownership of Clarity Financial, my investment portfolio, and my separate accounts. He walked in expecting to leave me with nothing. He walked out realizing I had more than he did. After the ruling, I gathered my folder, thanked Diane, and walked toward the courtroom doors. Derek was standing in the hallway, his father's hand on his shoulder, his mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief as if she were the victim. Derek looked at me. His voice was hoarse. "How long?" he asked. I stopped. I met his eyes. "Long enough," I said. And I walked out of that courthouse into the November air, and I breathed. Deep, full, unguarded breath, the kind I hadn't taken in years. Knowing that Derek finally saw the truth should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like release. Like setting down a suitcase I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten my arms were tired. I wondered if he'd ever understand what he lost, not the money, but the woman who would have given him everything if he'd simply treated her like an equal. A year and a half passed. Seasons turned. The world kept moving, and so did I. Clarity Financial expanded beyond anything I could have imagined sitting at that kitchen table with a laptop and a secret. We opened a second office in Atlanta. I hired a team of 12. Priya and I launched a division specifically focused on financial literacy and wealth-building strategies for women leaving abusive or controlling relationships. We partnered with shelters and nonprofit organizations across the Southeast, offering free workshops and one-on-one consulting. I bought a house, not a mansion, not a statement. A 3-bedroom cottage on a quiet street in Nashville, with a garden and a front porch where I drank coffee every morning and listened to birds instead of criticism. Lucas visited often. Rachel Whitman, my very first client, became one of my closest friends. I built a life surrounded by people who saw me clearly and loved what they saw. I was featured in a national business magazine. The headline read, "The Quiet Empire, How Claire Ashby Built a Multi-million-dollar Firm in Silence." I almost didn't do the interview. Visibility still felt dangerous sometimes, a reflex from years of hiding. But Priya convinced me. "Your story isn't just yours anymore," she said. "It belongs to every woman who's been told she's not enough." So I told it, and the response was overwhelming. Emails from women across the country. Messages from men, too. People who had been diminished, controlled, made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love them. I read every single one. Then, on a Wednesday evening in March, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in over a year, but recognized immediately. Derek. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. "Claire?" His voice was different, smaller. The bravado was gone. He sounded like a man standing in a room that had gotten too empty. "Derek, I read the article, the magazine piece." I said nothing. I waited. "I need to talk to you, in person. Can we meet?" Every instinct I'd built over the past 2 years told me to say no. But there was a quieter voice underneath. The voice of the woman who once loved him, who once believed in the life they were building together. That voice said, "Hear him out. Not for his sake, for yours." We met at a coffee shop in Midtown Nashville. Neutral ground. He was already there when I arrived. He looked older, thinner. The confidence that once filled every room he entered had deflated into something uncertain. He told me what had happened since the divorce. Vanessa, the woman he'd left me for, had ended things within 4 months. She'd moved to Chicago. His father's firm had lost 2 major contracts, and the family business was struggling. His mother's health had declined. Friends he thought were loyal had drifted away once the Callaway shine started to fade. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said quickly, reading my expression. "I know that's gone. I know I destroyed that." "Then why are you here, Derek?" He stared at his coffee. His hands were wrapped around the cup like he needed something to hold on to. "My dad's company is in trouble. Real trouble. We need a financial restructuring, and I know you're the best at what you do. I'm asking if you'd consider taking us on as a client. Professionally, I'd pay full rate. I'm not asking for a favor." I sat with that for a moment. The irony was so sharp, it almost cut. The man who told me my career didn't matter was now sitting across from me asking me to save his family's business. The man who laughed at my little accounting job was now admitting that my expertise was the only thing that could help him. Part of me, the old Claire, felt a pull. Not romantic, not sentimental, just the familiar gravity of being needed by someone who once made me feel necessary. That pull is dangerous. It disguises obligation as love. It whispers that helping them proves you've healed. But healing isn't about proving anything. Healing is about choosing yourself even when it's uncomfortable. "Derek," I said, and my voice was steady. Calm, not angry, not cold, just clear. "I hope your family finds a way through this. I genuinely do. Your father built something real, and I don't wish to see it disappear." He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "But I am not able to be the one who fixes it. Not because I'm punishing you. Not because I haven't forgiven you. But because stepping back into your world, in any capacity, means stepping back into a version of myself I fought too hard to leave behind." His face fell, not with anger, with understanding. And maybe that was the saddest part, that he finally understood, but only after it was far too late. "There are excellent firms in Nashville," I continued. "I can recommend 3 that specialize in exactly what you need. I'll send you their information tonight." He nodded slowly. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, then closed it. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry, Claire. Not just for the divorce, for all of it. For the way I talked to you. For the way I made you feel like you were less than what you are." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I mean it." We stood. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We just looked at each other for a moment. 2 people who had once shared a life acknowledging that the best thing they ever did was let it go. I drove home that evening with the windows down. The Nashville skyline glowed amber and pink against the fading sky. I thought about my mother, sitting at her kitchen table, teaching me that numbers don't lie and that a woman who understands her own worth can never truly be made small. I thought about Lucas, who always picked up on the first ring. I thought about Diane, who believed in my case before she believed in my story. I thought about every woman who'd emailed me after that article, every woman sitting in a marriage that felt more like a cage, every woman being told she was too much or not enough by someone who couldn't handle her becoming what she was always meant to be. Derek still has his family. He still has resources and connections and a name that carries weight in Ashford. I didn't take everything from him. I just stopped letting him take everything from me. So after everything you've heard, if you were standing where I am now, with your ex-husband sitting across from you asking for your professional help after years of belittling your career, would you step back into that world and call it forgiveness, or would you protect your peace and call it self-respect? I know what I chose, and I'd choose it again, every single time. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't defeated. She isn't weak. She isn't invisible. she's building. And that's where Claire's story ends. But maybe yours is just beginning. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone ever looked at you and decided you weren't enough, if you've ever been laughed at for dreaming bigger than the box someone else built for you, let this story remind you of something. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And the person who counts you out today may be the same person counting on you tomorrow. If this story hit you in the chest, if it made you feel something real, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Because you never know who's sitting in their car right now, in a parking lot, wondering if they're strong enough to start over. This story is proof. You are. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay sharp, and never, ever let anyone define your worth. This has been Untold Revenge Files. Until next time.